You know, what is it about society today that has, this sounds awful, but like, where's the heart and soul?
Yeah.
Because when you look, especially soul music, hip hop, even in the electronic stuff today, why are they pilfering Kraftwerk or Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes or the Beach Boys or whatever, and they keep doing it constantly? Or Fleetwood Mac.
Yes.
You know, why?
Yeah.
Why? You have to ask that. It's like there's something about that quality. Maybe it's when they were little, their parents listened to it and it's ingrained in them.
Yes.
I don't know what it is. Or as they get older and they realize, like your buddy talking about Delaney and Bonnie, like there's something really nice about that that's not here today.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to go backwards to
even the warmth of the recording studios like that, the 70s sound, like the Wally Heider studio in San Francisco. And sometimes now it's like if it's a record that came out between 72 and 74, and especially if it's studios that I recognize, like, I don't know, Trident and again, Wally Heider and others, it's like, oh, I want to get this because it'll probably sound great.
You know, it's weird you say that. A guy was in here the other day, actually earlier today, talking about the piano in Trident Studios. But tied into that, it's a weird thing. Like I read something a long time ago, which really blew my mind. And they said, go back and listen to Beatles and Stones records. And of course the Stones, I mean back in the heyday, right? They were saying the Stones were the bad boys. And that was partly a dreamed up PR ploy,
right,
or whatever,
and a foil to the Beatles,
right? Yeah. But they also say the music, you know, it's a little dirtier and looser and whatever. Okay, that could be too. But this one guy broke it down into a weird thing, and I think he was attributing it to the Stones in a way. He said the studio itself became an instrument. And he said, if you think about it, when the Beatles recorded, they did most of their stuff in one studio with one producer. Total controlled environment.
Yes.
Nothing ever changed.
Yes.
Okay, George Harrison brings a sitar in. Woo! You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he said, go back and listen to the Stones. They're recording in France. They're recording in England. They're going here. They're going to Muscle Shoals.
Right.
Every room has a different sound. And I just saw a nerd the other day on, you know, you go down a rabbit hole on YouTube.
Yes.
This guy saying, he was some producer, and he had a name like Ballistic Berry or something like that, you know, making fun of himself. But he was saying, why does music suck today? Why does it all sound the same? Everybody says that. And Rick Beato had done a piece. I don't know.
Yeah, I do know Rick Beato, yeah. I didn't see that though.
Yeah, well, he references Rick Beato's piece on that. But this guy takes it X amount further, and he blew my mind because he started talking about the room and natural equipment. And he said, that's the thing people don't realize, like air. What a difference it plays. The humidity, this, that, the way sound travels through the air in a room gives everything a unique sound. And he was saying that's what's wrong today because everybody uses this kind of computer with the same program, taken from the same samples, the same compression, the same. So it does literally sound the same.
Right.
Whereas, you know, where did Van Morrison do Astral Weeks and where did the Clash do London Calling? And it does.
Right.
You know?
That's a good point.
And people, it's such a nerdy thing, but it's something you can appreciate when you are a nerd that you can hear sometimes, like wine.
Yes.
My younger brother I guess you could say still is a wine freak. And he would talk about New World and Old World wines, and I was always like, whatever, dude. But he started teaching me, and it was a weird thing how when you develop that taste, in this case, your ear, to be able to hear, like, wow, that sounds totally different. Than, you know? That, yes, it's a nerdy thing. That at face value, you think, whatever, I just want to hear Nazareth.
Right.
But when you take some time, that's the key, right?
Yes.
Take some time to develop that relationship.
And some deep listening,
record.
right?
Yeah.
And then the difference between vinyl and CDs, not to again begrudge CDs,
No.
But vinyl, the warmth of that can be a great experience. And then there's the actual tactile aspect of holding the record, getting up somebody said, I don't want to get up every 25 minutes. And the response was, maybe you should get up every 25 minutes.
Well, yeah, you just were telling Eric about the File 45 pressings, which I've you know, you see nerds on Discogs complaining about that, like, oh man, like I got the redone, what is it, Southern Harmony, whatever.
Black Crowes, yeah.
The second Black Crowes album, which I didn't have. And I finally bought a copy, and I was reading everybody's thing, which maybe we shouldn't do, talking about, oh, well, the 2-disc version, but you got to flip it over and this, and you're just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
totally.
But that's the thing, too, that I read a while ago, which makes perfect sense. You and me, Matt, people our age, hear music differently than younger people. Why is that? Well, like they say, the studios, the way it was recorded, because everything when we grew up was analog to tape.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And space.
Yeah.
A lot of space. They weren't worried about compression and loudness and whatever. And then when digital comes along, if you think about it, it takes all that's natural and real and organic and turns it into the synthesized synthetic ones and zeros.
Yeah.
There's no space. There's no breathing.
Yeah.
There's no nothing.
No.
And then you say, like with earbuds or whatever, when they constantly have, and through a phone or a computer, they're raised differently to hear music differently. Not because they chose to, and it's not saying, oh, it's some crazy scheme, but it just happened that way.
I'm also curious, I'm not saying I know this to be true, but like the stuff that's coming out now, are people actually sitting and listening to it, or is it basically wallpaper to their lives, and will they put it on again in 10 years?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
The thing. I read a thing again a while ago, and this guy made a great point. He said, you know, take time to listen to a record.
Totally.
Like, stop your day.
Yeah. Put your phone away.
Yeah, and I read somewhere too, like psychologically speaking, it is helpful because it slows down the hectic day or whatever's going on that's crazy.
Yeah.
And you take your mind off for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
You listen, and in a way it's kind of teaching you the discipline again to stop.
Yeah.
And listen. Focus on this.
Well, everybody talks about being in the moment and meditation, and that's ultimately what it is, right? You just cut out all of the distractions, you're in the moment, and there is only that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? Which is
and
cool.
It just kind of takes you away. It's like spring in the middle of summer, right?
Yeah.
When you get that fresh breath or that second wind because you took. But it's also cool because you never know. Like, you're going to stop and listen and go, like, if I can ramble another minute, like.
Yeah.
You know, people would ask stuff like, how do you keep track of your records? And I'm like, I don't know, which is another weird phenomenon. Like, if you told me to name every record I have, I couldn't do it.
No.
But if you ask me specific titles, you know exactly what you have. So I thought, all right, I'm going to break down and I'm going to log every record into Discogs.
Yes.
And I told my brother, and he did the same thing. I said, dude, it was the craziest thing. Because for the first time in years, for some records, 20 years or more, I went through and I touched every record. And I said there was something, I know it sounds totally nerdy, but there was something about pulling out those records and going like, man, I haven't heard this in so long.
Yeah.
And pulling each one out, to get the matrix, because of all the work that you have to do.
Yeah.
But I said, it really, after going through the whole collection, I said it really kind of, it's like seeing an old friend or old family member.
Yeah.
It kind of made my heart grow fonder, and it kind of reignited that whole passion again.
Did you find yourself like as you were logging it, pulling out, saying the record and putting it to the side, saying I got to listen to this again?
Yeah, and I also found stuff like, when was the last time I listened to Joe King Carrasco? 1983.
Right.
I'm beyond that.
Yeah.
And it was a good way to see, like, I'm never getting rid of these. And then, like, what are you doing here? Get out.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
Because you look back at, like, your high school photos and say, what a fucking nerd, right? And you're like, why did I buy this record? What are you still doing here? Like I said.
Yeah.
But that illustrates another thing where people say, like I've heard people in the community or whatever you want to say, say like, if you haven't listened to a record in the last 6 months, get rid of it. And I think, well, that's kind of stupid, because if you have a decent collection, there's no way you can listen to every record in
Well,
6 months.
and kind of piggybacking on that, I feel like, my wife at one point said, "Why do you need so many records?" And this may be pure rationalization, but I said, when I'm in the mood for something, it has to be exactly right. And there's stuff that is close, but I pick the record that I know I need to listen to right now.
Yeah, or it's just like when you want that double meat cheese, that's what you want. Nothing else is going to satisfy.
Yeah.
But it's, my younger brother had said something too. He said, like, after doing the, what do you call it, the Discogs login, everything.
I haven't done mine yet. I have to
it's
do it.
Great.
Yeah.
It is handy. He said, it made me realize, and you have to be truthful. Like, do I like Joe King Carrasco anymore, or Pulp? I know I did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
How many times, that's a good question, how many times have I had the urge to hear Pulp in the last 30 years? None? Take a hike.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because there's certain records too where you might say, I haven't been in the mood. Was that a personal dig?
No, he's just laughing. But you know what I mean? It is a good way to think. I believe, especially from having a shop, it's taught me a lot, that with books as well, like, you should have a living collection.
Yeah.
Stuff that you like, or that inspires you, or that you find yourself going back to. Like that Joe King Carrasco record.
Yeah.
Okay, you get a laugh out of it once every 40 years. Is it worth the real estate?
Right.
No.
Right.
Now.
Yeah.
Now with streaming, you want to have a laugh with Joe King Carrasco? Punch it up on Spotify. But it doesn't need...
Totally.
You can give room to Delaney and Bonnie or Backstreet Crawler. You know what I mean? You don't have to...
So maybe my way back into Bad Company is through Backstreet Crawler or Free, right?
Yeah. Totally.
But a door that I've never gone through, which should be kind of cool. Yeah.
You should. But that's the thing, it's... Again, it's funny because you say that. Like, I was reading something about Paul Kossoff, the guitarist in Free. This is years ago. And he had those mutton chops, kind of like Woody Woodmansey in The Spiders, which, if you think about it, it doesn't fit in with Bowie's image, having a guy with the big facial, with big burns in your band. It's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But I always thought, Paul Kossoff looks like such an idiot, like a caveman in that band.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, when you go back and you look at Free, none of them were good-looking guys. They're
not
all
Paul Rogers?
Ratty. Yeah, well, not then. He had the chipped tooth.
Okay, yeah.
All kind of ratty.
Yeah.
And then you hear people talk about, I guess somebody wrote a story about the tragedy of Kossoff losing his life.
Yes.
And I was like, well, what's your problem, dude? So I'm like kind of digging around and okay, whatever. Was he worth it? And that was great, because then I was like, what? Was he all that? So then you go and you listen to solo Paul Kossoff, and then you say, hey, that's some good stuff.
Yeah.
And then you realize the Backstreet Crawler, and then again, you just go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, which is exciting.
And it's, again, going back to Delaney and Bonnie. It's like you hear these words.
Yeah.
People talk about these people, and you're just like, at some point, kind of like, I guess, me and Zappa, or Todd Rundgren. You keep hearing people talk about it, and you're like, you tried a couple times, you're like, I don't get it. Maybe you have to get to a certain age, and then you go like, I can appreciate that.
Yeah. Well,
I understand now why.
There's stuff that I have in my collection that I don't think I'm ever going to listen to again, or not, give the real estate up, like you say. And there's other stuff that comes around again. Zappa's a really good one for that. Like, I was a big Zappa fan, and then I got kind of tired of Zappa. Just the how there's 5 songs in a song, and it's kind of like, I just want to hear that one song, and then it's over, and now it's something else. And now I'm going back and really appreciating Zappa again. Certain stuff that I love. I love Zoot Lures. You know that record at all?
That's my favorite Zappa.
Is it? Yeah. That Torture Never Stops, and Black Napkins must be one of the greatest guitar solos ever, right?
Yeah, and the live versions of that.
Yes, I've been just started looking for those. Yeah. Have you got a definitive Black Napkins live that I should be looking for?
No, but a while ago I was trying to compile the world's greatest live album for me.
Yeah.
Of all my favorite cuts and whatever. And I had downloaded so many different, I shouldn't say that word, right? So many different versions.
Yeah.
Was it Pink Napkins as well? But so many different versions trying to find the one. There's several good ones, but I haven't found the definitive one.
Yeah.
But, when all else fails, pull out Zoot Lures, and at least you got the 5 or 6 minute version, But it's like, that's what sold me on that record.
Yeah.
And some people diss that record because they say it's maybe too rock or it's not typical Zappa, which is the reason why I don't like Zappa. I don't need all the xylophone,
Yeah.
and fart jokes and whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, smell my finger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't need that when I want to listen to music, you know?
I don't need more yellow snow.
Yeah, right. You know, it's like good guitar, some shredding or whatever. And
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know, but it's so weird you say that.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. But again, he's a guy you mentioned that you know you're going to go back to. So
Yeah.
he gets to stay
Yeah.
in your Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
so to speak, you know?
Yeah. And there's some that I've actually pulled out that I never really fully appreciated that I've started to go back on. Like even, I've always been a huge Neil Young fan. Well, I shouldn't say always, but I became a huge Neil Young fan probably like, for me, it was about 78 or 79, like a hurricane. That was my way in. It wasn't Harvest and then I got deep and into the Ditch trilogy and all of that. CSNY, I really wasn't that interested in. And then now I'm really loving CSNY.
Oh, really?
And Stills Young and how they go guitar off of each other. And again, there's a lot of stuff to go through that. Like there's a lot of Stills solo, Crosby solo, you know, Nash and Crosby solo, you know, duos. It's just fantastic.
Well, that's the thing. Going backwards, yes, it's old and whatever, but you can appreciate like at the speed at what some of these are, how prolific some were and some shouldn't be. But you know what I mean? You go back and then you really realize like, man, these guys.
Yeah.
Again, it just goes back to why are they called classic?
Yeah.
You know, even if we don't like some of the old hippie stuff or whatever, it has a life of its own.
Totally.
Because for some of these, the whole band is dead now, but people still keep going back to it. And like I say, what's the biggest record in the last 20 years? J Dilla Donuts or whatever. I don't know. You know?
Yes.
Are your kids, when they're 55 or 60, going to be talking about it? I'm going to put money down and say no.
So
maybe,
I mean, here's an interesting thing. So I have a stepson. He's 48 years old, and he grew up on J Dilla, you know, stuff, right? And he still talks about J Dilla, and I don't know whether he's still listening to it or whether it's still part of kind of the legend of that.
Like you said.
Yeah, and I've got to check with him on that and whether he thinks that's got a life. I think he'll say emphatically yes, but I don't know if that's sort of protecting your own turf, as it were, or whether it's really true. But
yeah, saving face.
Yeah.